They killed Nolan Wells on the boat.
I got this video a couple of days ago, and I've been kind of like not really interested to see it, but I finally just said, what the heck, let's listen to what he has to say. So let's listen to him.
They killed Nolan Wells on the boat. They covered him up with the life jackets. They all knew he was on the boat. They just laid him on the back of the boat and got towed in part of the way. Then they got their boat running and they got on in. And when they got in, they couldn't figure out where they were going to put him or what they were going to do. So they dropped everybody off. Then they went back out to the island that the GPS doesn't show, but they did because they disconnected it. Okay? And none of them had their phones with them when they went back. So there wasn't any trace of them going back. And they dumped the body. They came back, took the boat out of the water, then went over there at 3 a.m. and washed the boat, thinking washing the boat would get all the DNA and everything off the boat.
I'm sure that you got the same thing that I have. I don't think that he's describing what happened or like if he had firsthand knowledge of what happened and things of that nature. I think what he is doing is saying that this is what he heard on one of the panel's lives or something of that nature. And he is saying that these content creators, TikTok creators, we are the best investigators out there, and that the police or investigators, or if there are any in this case, should look into the things that we have researched, because he feels that we're spot on. Now, the DA and Warren might have released some stuff on...
There is a problem that surfaces immediately when that recording is treated as established fact. The clip itself tells us nothing about whether the person speaking witnessed any part of this directly. What we just heard could represent genuine first-hand knowledge from someone who was present. It could be second-hand information relayed from another source, or it could be a retelling of something that moved through online conversations and collected additional detail along the way. Until the identity of that source is established and the actual basis for their claim is clearly understood, the only accurate way to categorize this is as an allegation, not a confirmed finding, not a conclusion supported by the record. An allegation that requires examination before it can be taken any further. But that does not strip the statement of all significance, because what it does do is point directly toward records that are capable of being located and tested. If marine vessels, towing operations, GPS tracking systems, phone communications, or digital timestamps can independently confirm where people and boats were positioned during the relevant period, those records have the capacity to evaluate the story rather than simply circulate it. And that is the dividing line between investigation and repetition. One produces something that can be demonstrated, the other just keeps moving in circles.
Miss Christine came back and checkmate on them, because not she went and had her attorney subpoena, she subpoenaed Sea Tow Services and Water Marine Services that operates at South Mississippi, because she wants all the data, videos, cameras, anything from the time at 2 to 8 p.m., anything surrounding Nolan being on Horns Island, the protocols, and she also wants the manuals to what if something happens. Like, they want all the shenanigans, all the shebang bang bangs. Y'all gonna stop playing with Miss Christine, because checkmate, check the freaking mate. And I don't care what y'all say about Miss Christine. I don't care what y'all try to paint this narrative about Nolan or how she's like, but she's not playing with y'all. Y'all can go have several seats, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be more subpoenas coming around for y'all, because she's not playing. She's not playing. She's going to get answers. She's going to get some justice for her son. We're going to get answers for her son. Hello, not check. Hey, y'all, hey. So I know that people are starting to question this image, and I'm glad that they are starting the conversation about the image before me, because when I looked at it, when it originally came out, I zoomed in specifically into this in space, and I was thinking, like, does that look like a bunch of people laying, sunbathing, or anything of that nature? Or is it looking like what is that? So let me show you the picture I'm talking about. Now, you guys always know me. I'm sharing, I'm not alleging, I'm not accusing, I'm just asking questions. So pipe down with all that other conversation. But you tell me what you see and let's dialogue about that, because when this image literally first came out, it really took me back. Mind you, the other 3 boats that are there, but specifically zooming in into this location, it was taking me back. So what do you see? Because I'm not going to say anything. What did you see? And let's talk about it.
There is an investigation happening, and the paperwork matters. While you watch me scroll through the Jackson County Chancery Court website, understand what you're looking at. These are real court filings, including updated subpoenas issued today seeking records connected to the sea-tow call and towing activity. And that is only part of it. There are multiple filings, requests, and legal steps happening behind the scenes. The fact that the official autopsy has still not been publicly released also tells us this process is not finished. We should not confuse a lack of public information with a lack of activity. So don't lose hope. Don't assume nothing's happening. There's a lot happening. At the time, the public is investigating too. People are going back through interviews, timelines, statements, screenshots, and records, and they are noticing something important. What was said at the beginning does not always match what is being said now. The interviews that were supposed to settle the narrative are creating more questions. We are seeing contradictions between different accounts. We're going to continue breaking those statements down, especially statements made by Warren Hudson against the timeline, the records, and what was previously said. This is why we keep saying, follow the documents, follow the timeline, follow the evidence. We check power, not people.
A photograph serves one function in an investigation. It generates a question. It does not supply an answer. A still image can open a legitimate line of inquiry. It can direct attention towards something that warrants closer examination, but the interpretation of a distant, unclear, or ambiguous image cannot independently establish who or what is present within it. That determination requires more than visual analysis from an online audience, and that is precisely why the legal filings carry considerably more weight than the speculation that has built up around any image connected to this case. The court record reflects that Nolan's family estate is actively pursuing information tied to marine operations, telephone communications, recordings, camera systems, and the operational procedures surrounding those systems. Those requests are meaningful because they redirect the entire conversation. They move it away from what viewers believe they can identify in a photograph and toward information that may have been captured automatically as the actual events were unfolding in real time. It is also worth stating clearly that the absence of a publicly released autopsy report does not tell us what investigators have or have not established internally. It tells us only that one significant piece of documentation has not yet been placed in front of the public. A case that appears quiet on the surface is not necessarily a case that has gone still underneath it.
Free Press Action Network, so stay tuned. We have much more coming, and make sure you're following Free Press Action Network across all platforms.
This entire case is now building toward, and that brings everything to the next question. The one that sits directly underneath every piece of this case and has not yet been resolved. What happens when statements made publicly begin to run into direct conflict with records that can be independently examined and verified? That is not a hypothetical question being raised for the sake of discussion. It is the question that the subpoenas, the filings, the digital records, and the marine documentation are all being pursued to answer. Because when an account of events collides with a timestamp that says something different, or a location record that places someone somewhere they claimed not to be, or a communication log that contradicts what was said publicly, the conversation changes completely. It stops being a debate between competing narratives. It becomes a matter of what the documentation actually reflects versus what someone stated. And that is the stage this case is moving toward. Not louder claims, not more viral content, not more confident assertions from sources that cannot be named or verified. Documentation that either holds up under scrutiny or doesn't. That is where the answers in this case are most likely to be found, and that is exactly what this channel is going to keep tracking as each new piece of the record becomes available.
update in the Nolan Wells case. And baby, when I say this changes everything, it changes everything. A new star witness has come forward in the Nolan Wells case that completely destroys the police narrative and the DA narrative. You guys, when I tell you this star witness is literally a force of nature, it is a force of nature. Okay, so what am I talking about, right? Remember when all this happened, right? Go back to a time before you knew who Officer Django was. I know, I wish there was a simpler time. Okay, and Warren was out there on Horn Island looking like just cold-blooded, in my opinion. Talking about some, people die out here all the time. I know a lot of people that have died out here, right? And it set the stage. It set a narrative. It locked in a narrative that the police, the governor, the DA, all those boys' parents, and everybody, in my opinion, hid behind. Well, baby, this star witness has come forward, and when I say it's a force of nature, it's a force of nature. Who is this mysterious star island? I wrote my own bill. Who is this mysterious star witness? Baby, the star witness is Horn Island. Now, stop. Before you be like, Tease, I'm gonna hurt you. You just wasted my time. No, I didn't. Because People Magazine have unearthed the fact that in Horn Island, nobody has died from drowning in the last 6 years. And more importantly, even if you go into a decade or 2 decades ago, at most a handful of people, and we're talking 2, 3, 4 people, have passed away on Horn Island or from Horn Island drowning. Again, nobody has died, nobody has drowned on Horn Island in over 6 years, and before that is a sprinkling. Why is this so important? Because you guys, the nature, the geography, the currents is literally what blows this case apart. Let me explain. I have the receipts, and I promise by the end of this, yeah, you might agree with me too. All right, so where do we start? Let's get into this. Okay, first, let's talk about what I want to call the perjury trap, all right? Y'all remember, the boys came out there and started saying, right from the gate, saying people die out here all the time on Officer Tatum's interviews, on the media, on the news, everywhere they could. Now, why is that important? Because some people say that this proves that they were setting a predetermined narrative that they knew was a lie. Okay? How do we know it's a lie? Because and let's make sure we're right, the official Jackson County coroner records, okay, published in People Magazine, but more importantly, it's in Jackson County and it's in federal, right? The federal systems, right? They just stepped in and proved that nobody's drowned in over 6 years. Now, hold that snapshot right there. Because why is this so important? Why is this a star witness? First thing we have to ask, who gave those boys a narrative? Okay? Who gave those boys a narrative that, was it the police? Did the boys say something? And the police were like, don't worry, people die out there all the time. And it locked in a narrative that stuck in the boys' head, but more importantly, it stuck in everybody's head saying, you just need to accept Nolan drowned. Now pause right there, because now we have to splinter, okay? Materials and written procedures for handling reports and boats taking on water and sinking. The War Marine subpoena goes even deeper. She wants all calls tied to the incident, including dispatch calls and communications between the captain, local crew, and people connected to the boat. She also wants all other communications about the incident and records showing whether any of them changed or ended Toe's response. Woo! Now listen, I know what you're saying. T said it seems standard. This is not standard. This is a checkmate. When I say this is Thanos with the affinity ring coming in around the DA and being like, oh, and that grand jury, please. Okay, so let me break it down why this is so amazingly good, but also amazingly bad for the DA and the locals that want to keep complete control and secrecy over the case, all right? This is an absolute masterpiece. Let me start off by saying of civil litigation. Hands up to Ahmad R. Smith law firm, okay? Because here's the thing, you guys. Instead of bickering back and forth and you know how Officer, I don't know, maybe Officer Django was like, if they would just let Ben Crump go, the boys could give them information, and having to be like, please, Warren, can you tell us what you saw? Please, Jax, please. Instead of having to beg for information and sit and bark and roll over like a dog, and maybe if you make us happy, maybe then we'll tell you what we know about Warren. What we know about Nolan. Instead of all that, baby, let's get into this. It targets a neutral corporate third party. Now, I took notes. Private maritime towing corporations do not answer to Jackson County Sheriff or even local state politicians. They answer to federal compliance and corporate liability. That's right. Let's wake it up with the wrongful death suit, but more importantly, the federal compliance. Because things are federal compliance, everything needs to be documented, recorded, and there has to be a log. But it gets deeper. Listen to this, right? Listen. One, they're pushing for the unredacted hot mic audio and dispatch recording. Now, do you guys remember the leaked audio? And it wasn't really leaked, it was released by MDNR. But there was audio from the emergency call that included background voices shouting heavily debated phrases. Now, get this. The defense attorneys quickly went on national news claiming that it was doctored or just boat sinking panic. But this is a trap. CTO's corporate data servers record multi-channel, high-fidelity master tracks. By subpoenaing the files directly from the parent company, the family's independent audio engineers will get the original, uncompressed audio files before any compression or masking occurred. If these raw tracks do show, and many people believe it will, that there were people who were trying to revive Nolan on the boat hours before they told police he vanished, the accidental drowning on the island narrative is destroyed. Now, again, we are not saying that the boys at all are involved. We're just trying to find out what happened to Nolan, but that CTO call might be the first key. What's more, the GPS, you guys, breaking update in the Nolan Wells case, they have issued a new round of subpoenas. And this one, baby, when I say, if you had something to do with either Nolan's tragic ending or the way Nolan was found, baby, you might as well turn yourself in right now, because Ben Crump, Ahmad Smith, the NAACP, who else? Eric Hart, Nolan's parents, baby, they have done a checkmate. It's over for you. It's over for that DA, and it's over for that small town. Assuming they had something to do. Baby, the cover-up, the conspiracy, anything that is going wrong is about to be brought to life. And baby, guess what? They're not going through the small town politics. They're done begging the DA for anything, okay? They are going to federal compliance. And I know what you're saying, Taste, it sounds boring, but as I get into this, I'm going to tell you how the cover-up, if there is one, is about to be exposed in full color. And there's nothing the lawyers, there's nothing the DA, there's nothing the governor of Mississippi, there's nothing no one can do to stop it. All right, guys, let's wake this up. So where do we come at it? Well, let's think about it, okay? We do remember when, unfortunately, Nolan had his 19th heavenly birthday. May he rest in peace. And I thought it was a bit of cruelty that the DA put a letter out the night before, warm release text that made it look like, what? This make you look more, right? And I was like, what are they trying to do? Well, it looks like Nolan's family got up the day after, wiped their tears, and they issued a new round of federal subpoenas. But let me tell you what these subpoenas are, and let me tell you why they are the end game. Everything we've been asking, everything we've been wanting, everything we've been curious about, baby. I will say one thing. Well, let me get into the story, but let me just say this. I do believe that, Loki, I do believe that if that town had been slightly empathetic, cared a little bit about the even didn't treat her like she was dirt on their shoe, talking about we told you what happened to your boy and all this stuff, I really do think the town would have gotten away with it if the town had something to do with it. I think that because they were so cruel, because they were so cold-blooded, that is why they were forced to do this, and that is why they are getting even more than they bargained for. Okay, hold on. Okay, now the source of this is TMZ. I think that Ocean Springs ran to TMZ to get, hey, wah, but TMZ can't save you from this, okay? Now get this. TMZ has obtained 2 new subpoenas filed Thursday on behalf of Nolan's estate. One, and I think this is Ahmad Smith's law firm, one for CTO Services International, and another from Reward Marine Services, which operates at CTO, Mississippi. For CTO, she basically wants everything connected to the July 4th incident from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., including calls, recordings, dispatch records, and documents showing who handled the response. She's also asking for CTO's training
Secret Service Sam here, and Christine Walmsley is subpoenaing the hell out of them right now. She has filed a series of legal subpoenas targeting social media, technology, and marine service companies to investigate her son's final movements and communications surrounding his death. Now, social media and tech companies, as we know, she filed in Jackson County Chancery Court. The initial subpoenas target Meta, Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Snap, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and the tracking app Life360 to secure GPS logs, messages, and deleted content. Marine and dispatch records. Additional subpoenas target marine services, including Sea-Tow and Ward Marine, requesting dispatch logs, radio recordings, and communications tied to the July 4th incident. Now, the family's legal team is seeking clarity after reporting discrepancies in location tracking and concerns over wiped or deleted messages from his phone. So in layman's term, thank God we are going to find out what happened on those Sea-Tow logs. We're going to get all the recorded calls. We're going to find out who's on it. I'd like to find out who that park ranger is. Can we subpoena the park ranger? Thank God for the team, the dream team as we're calling them, because now we are going to get some answers that they have not wanted to give us. Secret Service Sam out, Samson for president of the world.
Nolan Wells' case just got hot. Just when they thought they had the upper hand, Nolan Wells' estate just came in with guns a-blazing. And that's what we're going to talk about. But before we get into that, I need you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so that you're alerted the next time I upload a new video. That's right, Nolan Wells' estate just filed a subpoena for the Sea-Tow call. And that's what we're about to talk about. As of August 20th, 2026, the estate of Nolan Wells has subpoenaed the Sea-Tow call. That's right. See, this is why they were so upset that Nolan Wells' parents opened an estate on behalf of Nolan Wells. See, they thought they were only going to come with lawsuits and a money grab and this, that, and the other. It's so much more that that estate can do. But if you are not privy to it, then you don't know. You just think it's all about money. No, it's about justice at the end of the day. These people want justice for their son. And since everyone wants to say the transcription that Janetta Brantley did on the Sea-Tow call wasn't legit, it was gibberish, everything that she was talking about, it wasn't, you need the original. Okay, I told you, the loudest in the room is always the weakest person. That's the weakest link, because they're always doing this when the quiet person over there is doing this. When I tell you there will be justice in Nolan Wells' case, that's exactly what I mean. When they get that, they have 21 days to turn over the original Sea-Tow call, and the professionals will transcribe it. They will do exactly what Janetta did. The background voices, pull them to the front. Take away the extra, and you'll hear exactly what was said during that call. And guarantee we will come out with victory, because they are going to come back with the same exact thing as Janetta Brantley did. She gave all her credentials. What she did was legit, but they had to debunk it some way, somehow. And now look what you did. It's amazing. Let me explain something to you. No one is above the law. And this is what every single American needs to understand. This justice system, it has to change. these two cases between Nolan Wells and Carmelo Anthony, I said it once and I'll say it again, is going to go down in history for Texas and for Mississippi. Because look how everything happened. Another case came about after Carmelo's case, and the tables was turned on it. And what did they want to claim? Oh, it wasn't them. They didn't do it. He drowned. Yeah, I bet. Well, we'll see in 21 days, now won't we? The estate of Nolan Wells has spoken. And the original CETO call has been subpoenaed. Let me know how you feel about this new information in the Nolan Wells case. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so that you're alerted the next time I upload a new video.
Now let's slow everything down right here, because after listening to all of those clips together, there is something that absolutely needs to be pulled apart before we go any further. What people are saying out loud is not automatically the same thing as what the evidence is capable of proving. And that gap, right there, is where this case has become genuinely significant beyond the noise surrounding it. The statement we heard at the opening of this coverage, that Nolan was killed on the boat, comes from an anonymous source. We do not know from that recording whether the person speaking had any direct knowledge of what they were describing. We do not know whether they personally witnessed a single moment of what they are alleging. We do not know whether they were passing along something that traveled through several other conversations before it reached them, and that matters enormously. Because if we are serious about finding real answers in Nolan Wells' case, we cannot simply lift one unverified narrative off the table and replace it with another one and call that progress. That is not following the trail. That is just changing which story we are running with. Right now, one of the most concrete trails available in this case is the paper trail. Nolan's legal team has been actively working to obtain records from technology companies and location tracking services directly connected to his final movements. Reporting has confirmed that subpoenas have been issued seeking information from companies including Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, and Life360. That is significant for a reason that is worth sitting with for a moment. The question this case needs answered is no longer simply, what does someone remember happening that day? The question is, what do the actual records reflect? Think carefully about the difference. If two people recall the same event in conflicting ways, that is one problem to work through. If someone's account of events shifts and changes over time, that is a separate problem. But if a timestamp, a location record, a communication log, or a server entry directly contradicts what a person has stated publicly, something fundamentally different has occurred. Now there is something tangible, something that exists independently of anyone's memory or motivation, that can be placed on a table and examined. That is why the digital evidence carries the weight it does in this case. Life360 activity records, account metadata, location information, message content. These are not theories being floated in a comment section. They are potentially verifiable documentation that existed before anyone started arguing about what happened. Now that the competing claims have been laid out, the most critical step is separating the speakers from the evidence itself. The allegation that opened this case is serious enough to warrant genuine investigation, but the recording alone does not independently establish it. We do not know from the material available whether the speaker was personally present for the events they described, and we should not manufacture an answer to that question out of assumption. That same standard of scrutiny applies to every other claim surrounding this case. A statement that people die on Horn Island with regularity can be cross-referenced against documented historical records. If the available record does not reflect that characterization, that gap deserves direct examination. But identifying a discrepancy would not by itself prove that anyone deliberately constructed a false account. It would simply establish that the statement and the record are not aligned and need to be reconciled. That is the deeper reason the subpoenas carry so much importance. They go after primary source documentation. What someone recalls can be placed alongside records that were generated at the actual moment events were unfolding. Location data can be measured against the movements people claim to have made. Dispatch logs can be compared against accounts given after the fact. Original communications can be examined alongside any transcripts or partial excerpts that have been circulating publicly. That is the dividing line between a theory and something that can actually be tested. A theory tells you what might have happened. A verified record gives investigators something they can hold up against the evidence to determine whether the theory survives that contact or collapses under it. Nolan's legal team is pursuing exactly that category of information to reconstruct his final movements and the communications surrounding them. Then there is the marine dimension of this case. The CTOW recording has become one of the most heavily debated pieces of material connected to Nolan's death. Disagreements have emerged over what is audible in the background. Disputes have developed over how the audio should be properly interpreted. Questions have been raised about whether what circulated online accurately represents the original file in its complete and unedited form. And all of that debate produces the most straightforward question imaginable. Why continue arguing over interpretations when the original recording is capable of being obtained and examined directly? That is the part I want to be understood clearly. If the original file is secured, the entire conversation transforms. It moves away from competing claims about what different listeners believe they can detect and toward a qualified technical analysis of what is actually present in the source material itself. That is not the same conversation. It is a completely different one. And it is a primary reason why the legal activity surrounding this case deserves sustained and serious attention. Nolan's family is not sitting back and waiting for social media to eventually sort this out. They are actively using the legal process to pursue documentation that can be independently verified. The digital side of this investigation may ultimately prove just as consequential as reconstructing the physical timeline of that day. Records held by social media platforms and location services can potentially surface account activity, message content, timestamps, location coordinates, and additional metadata. But none of those records tell the complete story on their own. Digital systems carry their own complications: coverage gaps, imprecise location estimates, deleted or missing material, synchronization errors between devices, records that demand specialized technical interpretation before they can be properly understood. That is precisely why authentication is not a step that can be skipped or treated as a formality. A screenshot is not equivalent to an original server record. A transcription is not equivalent to an original audio file. A location pin on a map is not necessarily a precise measurement of where a person was physically standing. Every individual piece of evidence has to be assessed for its source, its reliability, its completeness, and the limitations of what it can and cannot establish. The marine records present the identical challenge. If an original CTOW or Marine Service recording is obtained, the central questions are not what online audiences believe they can hear when they play it. The central questions are whether the file is authentic, whether it is complete and unaltered, how it was stored and maintained, and what a qualified technical examination can reliably extract from it. And sitting at the center of every single one of these records is a person. Before Nolan Wells became a case file, before his name became a hashtag attached to competing theories, before people were dissecting TikTok videos and debating audio clips and arguing over boat locations and timelines, he was someone's son. He was someone's closest friend. He had a future that the people who loved him were fully expecting to watch develop. And now his mother is left trying to understand what took place during a few hours that permanently altered everything. That is why this case is owed more than speculation can deliver. It is owed patience. It is owed accuracy. And above all else, it is owed the truth, whatever that truth ultimately turns out to be. Nolan's name should not be reduced to a rotating collection of online theories. The entire purpose of pursuing these documents is to replace what is currently uncertain with the strongest answers the evidence is capable of providing. If you value coverage that takes the time to draw a clear line between verified information and unverified allegation, subscribe to this channel. The reason to stay is straightforward. When a new filing surfaces, when a recording becomes available, when a location record or an official statement enters the public record, we can examine what it actually changes rather than simply reacting to whichever interpretation is being delivered the loudest. Now let's return directly to the statement that opened this coverage. Nolan Wells was killed on the boat. Is that established by what we currently have? No. Not from that clip alone. Is it something that investigators should set aside and move past? That is an entirely different question with an entirely different answer. Any allegation serious enough to investigate deserves to be evaluated directly against the available evidence. If the evidence points toward it, follow it. If the evidence points away from it, follow that with equal commitment. That is how a legitimate investigation is supposed to function, and that is precisely why the records carry the weight they do, because the most important evidence in this case may not originate from the account with the largest following. It may not emerge from the most widely circulated video. It may not be found inside the most dramatic theory being passed around online. It could come from something far less attention-grabbing. A timestamp, a GPS coordinate, a communication log, an original unedited audio file. A document that exists in the record and cannot be explained away no matter how many times someone attempts it. That is what deserves the focused attention. That is what this channel is going to keep tracking. So if you have stayed with us through this entire coverage, I want to ask something specific in the comments. Do not simply tell me who you believe is responsible. Do not repeat a theory you encountered somewhere else. Tell me this instead. What is the single record you believe could answer the most significant unanswered question remaining in the Nolan Wells case? Is it the original CTOW audio, the location data, the message records, the reconstructed timeline, or something else entirely that has not received enough attention? And while you are in the comments, tell me where you are watching from, city, state, or country. I want to know who is in this room with us, because what happened to Nolan Wells is larger than any single video. Every time a new document enters the record, we are going to examine what it actually says. Every time a new document enters the record, we are going to hold it up against what can be verified. And every time someone states with confidence that this is what happened, we are going to ask the question that should always come next. What actually proves it? If that is the standard of coverage you are looking for, stay with this channel. We are going to keep following the records, we are going to keep tracking the timeline, and we are going to keep pressing the questions until the evidence produces answers that are stronger than the ones currently available. Now let's be direct about where this case actually stands. The allegation that Nolan Wells was killed on that boat is serious enough to be pursued, but it cannot be elevated from allegation to established conclusion simply because it is being repeated with greater frequency or greater confidence. Repetition is not verification. The same principle applies in the opposite direction. If an alternative account of events is offered, that account is equally required to survive contact with the evidence. Investigators do not build a case by selecting the most compelling narrative. They establish what happened by testing every competing account against physical evidence, documented records, expert analysis, and independently verifiable information. That is why the subpoenas matter beyond their surface significance. The value of a subpoena is not that it confirms a theory in advance. Its value is that it compels access to information that may validate a timeline, contradict one, or reveal that an assumption widely treated as settled was never supported to begin with. Records obtained from technology companies may help reconstruct the sequence of communications and physical movements during Nolan's final hours. Marine service documentation may bring clarity to the calls made, the dispatch activity recorded, and the response procedures followed. An original audio file, properly secured and authenticated, could resolve disputes that have been running for weeks without resolution. But none of these sources should be treated as definitive before they have been fully and carefully examined. That is the standard this channel intends to maintain throughout this case. Not who carries the largest platform, not who delivers the most forceful accusation, not which explanation generates the strongest reaction from an audience. The only question that matters is simpler than all of that. What can actually be demonstrated? If a new document alters the established timeline, that needs to be stated directly. If a record contradicts something said publicly, that contradiction needs to be named and its significance honestly assessed. If a claim turns out to have no evidentiary foundation supporting it, that needs to be acknowledged without hesitation. And if the evidence eventually leads somewhere that no one anticipated, the evidence has to be the thing that determines where this goes. There is still genuine uncertainty in this case. The original records being pursued through the legal process have not all been made available for public examination. Several disputed statements remain unresolved. A number of conclusions circulating across social media remain exactly what they are, conclusions reached without the documentation needed to support them as findings. That is precisely why the next stage of this investigation is the one that carries the most consequence. The final answer in the Nolan Wells case should not be claimed by the most viral theory. It should belong to the evidence. And until the full record is available, the most honest and most responsible position is to keep investigating without allowing uncertainty to be dressed up and presented as certainty. Whatever arrives next, whether it is a new filing, a record release, a technical examination, or an official statement on the record, the standard does not change. Identify the source, establish what it actually says, test it carefully against the existing timeline, and be straightforward about what it still cannot prove. That is how this story deserves to be followed, and that is exactly how we are going to keep following it.